Shalom, shalom, chevra. Here on Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, where we mourn the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, we mourn the persecution of the Jewish people, crusades, pogroms, Shoah, Holocaust, and exile. We mourn a history of persecution. We mourn a current reality of injustice and oppression, of a dark world. The saddest day in the Jewish calendar, where we are asked to cry for suffering in the world. Because the number one most important role, in my belief, that religion can play in the world is reducing suffering. Reducing suffering. And so we ask ourselves as Jews, how do we reduce suffering? And undeniably, quantitatively and qualitatively, the most amount of suffering that exists in the world today is from the animal kingdom. From the animal kingdom. When we look at, just reflect briefly on the numbers of 10 billion land animals being killed each year in the US for food. That's about 50 to 70 billion land animals killed each year for food around the world, not excluding fish. And that 99% now of animal products, animals killed for food, is done in factory farming. It's done in factory farming. We are dealing easily, quantitatively and qualitatively, based upon the lifestyle, not to mention the death, but mostly the life, with the greatest suffering crisis today. And so Tisha B'Av is about, today, the saddest day in the Jewish year, is about reducing suffering for animals. Reducing suffering for animals. Not only because in Eicha and Lamentations, it talks about our food sources over and over, about hunger and about bread, and about what happens with broken food sources and the injustices involved there. But because Tisha B'Av yearns for us to remove the broken shackles, the shackles that keep those bound to oppression and unjust systems, the systems that enable mass suffering to continue to happen. And our food sources today are obvious torture towards animals there. It is abuse to human beings based upon the health implications of eating such food. It is an abuse of the land. It's an environmental justice issue. It is an abuse of the hungry around the world, because we know the hunger that Eicha, Lamentations, talks about today is increased. The hunger problem is increased based upon the amount of water and other factors that go, and the land that is used towards feeding cattle en masse that are killed for food rather than fed to hungry human beings. And actually, it's interesting enough, the Shem Mishmuel, because we talk about the Beit HaMikdash, the temple on Tisha B'Av, the Shem Mishmuel actually talks about the progress from the Mishkan, from the tabernacle, in the journeys between Egypt and the Promised Land, to the progress to the Beit HaMikdash. And what's the progress that Shem Mishmuel says? The progress is animal products. He says the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, in the journeys through the desert for 40 years, had more animal products than the Beit HaMikdash did, than the temple did in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. And so too, as we mourn the destruction of a temple, we're also yearning for that progress of a world that is free from animal exploitation, a world that is free from animals, from sentient beings as being our. Because the Shoah, the Holocaust, is one of the many dimensions we mourn on Tisha B'Av, we can also think about Levinas's point that in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, he said he saw a dog when there was no humanity left there, a dog that looked him in the eyes and stared at him and saw his humanity, Levinas. And he said it was the last Kantian in Germany. Of course, Kant was a German philosopher who talked about every person being an ends in themselves, and the universal imperative, categorical imperative that comes with treating every person in a Buber fashion as a thou, not as an it. And he saw the dog, and the dog could see in him what no Nazi German could see, that he was a being, he was a human being of dignity, of dignity, and of infinite value. And so, friends, the purpose of Torah, the purpose of Judaism, or at least the most central one, is to reduce suffering. To reduce suffering. And Tisha B'Av, this day of mourning, of crying, is a time for us to cry with the animals who are tortured, are slaughtered in masses, are stripped away from their families, stripped away from any form of natural living, for us to really feel it on this day. Because many of us have trouble watching these videos of torture throughout the year. But one day where we can sit not just with the hope and the progress of what we're building together as a Jewish vegan movement, as a global vegan movement, but to sit with the suffering so we can never take our eye off the prize. We can truly understand what is happening. We need humility today because no one saw this pandemic coming. No one saw coronavirus coming. Anyone who did is obviously lying. No one was prepared. And so anyone who approaches with radical certainty today the answers to all the problems of the world should be suspect. If anything of this time of uncertainty should evoke, it is humility, that we don't have all the answers. We don't know how we're going to create a more just world, exactly. But we have to keep our eyes on the prize, the certainty of what the great evils are. And factory farming today is undeniably one of the greatest evils that we are looking at today. Not only because of how it treats animals, which we know is horrific, how it treats workers who are predominantly immigrants living in poverty, how it abuses the land and our resources, and how it neglects to mention, and how government is complicit and corrupt through big ag money in not mentioning the health implications for human beings and all the dangers. And we saw the worker mistreatment in terms of the pandemic that's come around. And we see now the interconnectivity of the pandemic and global health with our food sources. And so how do we do tshuva? How do we engage in teshuvah, repentance, on Tisha B'Av in regards to this? Some of us are already vegan, and we can do more to combat these systems of oppression which have a great deal of interconnectivity between them, the worker justice, the environmentalism, the animal rights issue. And some of us are not. And so there's an ascetic component to our complicity that we reflect on today, the ascetic component of removing ourselves from certain types of what some would deem as pleasures. I mean, I can't imagine it anymore as a pleasure to drink a glass of milk, to eat an egg, to eat a piece of beef or chicken or shrimp or something like this. Any of these foods that some might define as pleasurable, it's just unfathomable to me. But if we can't embrace that ascetic ideal, and to be sure, it's not pure asceticism, the vegan food options are tremendous, but to minimize, maybe those who can minimize the amount they benefit from such industries. But beyond asceticism and minimization and minimalizing of this content, there's also the tikkun. The tikkun, the repair of the past and a repair of the future, of what can be done, of what we can do, what we can reflect on Tisha B'Av today in terms of what needs to be done to eradicate such systems from American society, from Israeli society, from the global marketplace. So friends, join me today in this spiritual reflection to sit with the suffering of the animal kingdom, to sit with the reality of the torture, to sit with the guilt of the complicity we have of our industries, our dollars being tied up with big ag today, with factory farming today. And then to double down on rachamim, on compassion, for us to double down on fostering a more loving and just society, for us to double down on only desiring pleasures that come from that which is kosher and yosher, that which is just and sacred. And for us to see, as the Shem Mishmur pointed out, that just as there was progress from a mishkan to a mikdash, from a tabernacle to a temple of less animal products, so too may the Jewish community be a leading light forward towards a messianic era where we move completely away from animal products of any kind and benefiting from any type of suffering of any sentient being. May we build that world together. And I believe, friends, I believe ultimately that the kosher industry is complicit in how it's been manipulated. How it's been manipulated for kashrut to mean just another capitalistic enterprise geared towards profits that is neglecting and abusive towards the welfare of workers, towards the sentience of animals, towards our environmental responsibilities. And we dream of a redeemed kashrut, the prophetic ideal, where our food, our eating represents our deepest values. And so if you're fasting today, I wish you a tzom kal, an easy fast. And if you're not fasting, but you're reflecting on your food sources today, may we together build this Jewish vegan movement, this Jewish animal advocacy movement, to make sure that Jews around the world are not only not complicit, but are leading on this front. And to be sure, friends, the Jewish social justice space, also engaged in many significant, important causes, does not have this issue on the table. So this is not a political issue of left and right. There are folks on the left and right who will ignore this issue, will be compassionate to every issue of injustice, and then go eat burgers. And friends, we need to do our work in every sphere, in the social justice space, in the right-wing world, in the left-wing world, in the Jewish world, in Israel and America and beyond. And so friends, our work begins to the next level. Join us together. If you're not on our Shemayim newsletter, please join. If you're not on the Shemayim Facebook page or in the Shemayim Facebook group, please join. If you're not in our Shemayim email group, not only our newsletter, but our group of conversation, please join. We have an annual retreat where you can join for us to strategize and joyfully celebrate our work together. We have a campus fellowship to engage college students to bring more veganism to their campus. We have a whole host of advocacy projects that we're involved with today. We have our Synagogue Vegan Challenge, where we're giving grants in partnership with Veg Fund to synagogues to offer vegan options and vegan education. And the work is just beginning. We're going to the next level, and we need you. Wishing you a meaningful Tisha B'Av. And may our sorrow turn to joy. May our suffering turn to pleasure. May we build a more just society together in God's light, in the light of the human being created b'Tselem Elokim, and in the light of the animal. Because friends, one interpretation, which we heard at a Shemayim retreat, of when God says, let us create humans in our image, that God is not talking to the plurality of God within the monotheism. God is not talking to the angels. God is talking to the animals, the non-human animals. Let us create humans in our image, in the image of God and in the image of animals. We are a part of the animal kingdom, not separate. We are also a part of God's kingdom. And our job is to bring Shemayim down to earth, to bring the heavens down to earth, not to escape this world and our responsibility up to the Shemayim, but bring the Shemayim, bring the heavenly realm here, where we live in a world where the lion lies down with the lamb. And we see that we are in fact the lion. We are the threat. We are the greatest threat to our environment. The humans are the greatest threat to our environment, to animals, and to global sustainability. May we be leading lights together. May Tisha B'Av become a messianic day of celebration. Wishing you all blessings for good health and joy.